I think Taylor Swift isn't the only one that gets to have eras.
Right.
And I was in my self-hating era for a long time. And I used to be very mad at my childhood self for being like, why didn't you tell people what was going on? Why didn't you know that you were non-binary? Like, just really absurd expectations. And now the new era I'm in is trying to think about my childhood genius. How did you survive? Because I don't think I have the capacity to do that now. And one of the things that I really learned when I was very young is my relationship with my family of origin and my relationship to normative love are going to be fraught, because both of these projects require self-betrayal in order for me to participate in these units. I have to hide certain parts of myself in order to be loved. Friendship is the only place that I have where I get to become myself. And so I started to become a socialite at the age of 6. I was talking to everyone. I was finding ways to bridge differences. One of the memories my friends told me about was in 7th grade English. The girls were on one side of the room, the boys were on the other side of the room, and I went and sat with the girls. And I said, we're all in this together. I was the connector. And so my entire life, I've really valued the importance of friendship, and I've understood friendship to actually be the highest and most elevated form of romance. And that's been the sort of life raft that's kept me afloat. So I think it's been interesting because as I speak about my childhood, so many of my friends from my past are like, where are we in these stories? Because the truth is, we were defending you, even if you didn't know it. And defense doesn't look like saying, don't call that person the slur. Defense also looks like walking down next to the hall with me, or creating the space for me to just hang out and play video games. And it was those kind of pre-verbal forms of allyship that I find myself most nostalgic for in this moment, that our points of connection and activation weren't out of a sense of political solidarity, but out of a sense of human solidarity, of we're all in this small town and we're all in it together, of we know each other deeply. I remember when I first started coming out as gay, which was the only word that I had access to, which is really tragic, but I was 16, 17. And I made a list of each one of my friends, and I wanted to have a one-on-one conversation with each one of them. I've always been very strategic and methodical. And I would plan like ideal scenarios. We're getting Sonic, and we're having a conversation here. We're taking a walk, we're having it here. And one of my best friends, who is blonde, blue-eyed, Christian, evangelical, I told him while we were on a walk, and he said to me, if you had told me this a few years ago, I would have cut you out of my life because I think that's wrong. But I've just known you so long, I can't imagine a life without you. And that meant so much to me, because that's really what this is all about, is that actually if we really see each other face to face, if we understand that fundamentally our common unity is in our trauma, our fear, our pain, and our anguish, then all of that political stuff becomes easily understood. You don't even need to understand it. It's deeply felt.
Yeah. ALOK, you're saying so many wonderful, wise things. It's like hard to know where to go, but I do want to pull on one thread. You talked about friendship as the highest or the most elevated expression of romantic love. Can you say more? I really want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, totally. First of all, I just want to commend you for being on brand right now with throwing thread into this conversation. Because last night I was thinking of thread puns nonstop because of this latest app. So kudos to you. Everything that we think is transcendental about romantic love can be available in friendships. And it's actually quite conservative of a project to say, put all of your eggs in one basket, rely on one person to give you that kind of emotional care and proximity. And I know this so profoundly because I watched my aunt, a lesbian activist, die last year. And on her deathbed were all of her best friends who knew how to speak unflinchingly about death because of AIDS. And my mom looked at me and said, I made a really bad decision. Heterosexuality is actually hurting us because we don't know how to create ties like this, because we don't know how to actually talk about illness and pain and debility like this, because I'm embarrassed of my aging in a way that she wasn't. When she had so many sores in her mouth and her face was so gaunt, people still called her beautiful and gorgeous and sexy and danced with her. And I've seen so many examples in my life of how friendship actually allows us to practice how to learn how to be lovable. Because I think that was the most radical thing I've ever done. Every single thing I was taught was to minimize myself, invisibilize myself, disappear, quiver. And then I met other queer people who had the audacity to love me and to give me permission to love myself. And I think that what we do in a culture of romantic supremacy is we put that sort of like temporary high, that deep ritualized elegance put into all of our pop songs and movies on this plane, like it's some sort of zenith of being. But when I think about the most romantic scene, it's me and all of my friends at dinner. It's being able to unfurl. It's being able to be loved for my contradiction, not despite it. And so what friendship has continually clarified for me is that I get to change. And when it comes to my family, I'm always going to be their child. When it comes to a romantic partner, I'm always going to be the romantic partner. But what's interesting about friendship is the elasticity, the ability to shift over lifetimes and generations. I've always said that I find that it's really an issue in this culture that we don't have a day to commemorate the power and potency of friendship. In Finland, I believe that there's actually a Friendship Day. And I want us to start glorifying friendship, actually telling the stories of who helped us get through our breakups, who cared for us, what kind of, how do we live today, and how is that the byproduct of the people who loved us?
I love what you're saying about friendship, particularly because what it highlights is so much of what you're talking about, so much of what everyone's talking about culturally now, rightfully so, is masculinity. I'm not going to call it toxic masculinity because we've used that word so much that I sometimes think it's been siphoned of its meaning. But it seems to me that one of the things that makes masculinity so toxic is that it's one of its traits is to not have this form of friendship that you're describing, which I know by its absence in my life throughout much of it. You know what I mean? Like, something that marked my youth was not having these sorts of relationships you're describing. And I guess I wonder, was there ever a point when you felt alone, or have you always had these kinds of friendships?
Reality is composed of the stories that we tell about it. I'm a big believer that what we pay attention to comes to constitute what we think of as truth. So in one story, I could tell you that I've always had this perverse sense that no one in the world would understand me, that I'm some freak of nature. The earliest memories, actually, that I have are telling my parents, what if I was born a duck or a goose or an alien? What if I was born on a different planet? I don't belong here. The dysphoria was not just about gender, it was about humanity.
Totally.
I didn't understand why people were so obsessed with what I saw to be foolish pursuits, like power. I knew from the get-go what we were all searching for was vulnerability and was truth. I knew that razor sharp. So I could tell that story, but I'm no longer, because I'm in my I was a childhood genius era.
What do you think vulnerability looked and felt like to you at that age? Because that concept is like kind of massive. I'm just curious. What would be a snapshot of that?
It looked like what I was practicing, which was when I was angry, I let people know it. When I was sad, I let people know it. I didn't choreograph myself into making other people more comfortable. I just was. The main mode of being was being, not doing. It was existing in my unruly raucousness. And that's why I think that term maturity is a weapon in our culture, because actually we have so much to learn from young people who teach us that maturity shouldn't actually be sundering ourselves from what we feel. Maturity is actually being able to express it.
Totally.
And that expression becomes the pathway to connection and intimacy. So instead of telling that story of aloneness, what I actually tell the story of, and then I found ways to communicate I am alone. And then through my art, I found other people who felt the deepest hesitations, ambivalences, and insecurities that I did.